Hi, I'm Cora. Welcome back to Crimes Across Borders, where we dive into strange, compelling, and sometimes frustrating true crime cases from around the world. Have you ever noticed that every couple of years, someone pops up saying they've finally solved the Jack the Ripper case? Or maybe it's just me. Like a clockwork, there's always a new theory, a fresh suspect, or some groundbreaking piece of evidence that suddenly gets people talking again. And in 2014, that happened in a big way. Headlines all over were screaming that a man named Aaron Kosminski, a name that had been already floating around for a while, was finally confirmed as Jack the Ripper. Case closed, right? Well, not really. Again. Because even though that story caught fire, I mean, especially online, the actual science behind it, it's way more complicated than people think. And honestly, once you start digging into how this evidence came to be, it kind of feels like one of those things that sounds impressive until you slow down and actually look at it. So, because all of that old news came to be new news again, in today's video, we are going to take a closer look at what this DNA breakthrough actually says, and more importantly, what it doesn't. And if you've ever seen one of those TikToks or YouTube shorts claiming the mystery is solved, this might make you see it a little differently. So let's talk about Jack the Ripper, some of the most popular suspects, the real story behind this mystery shawl, and why this big reveal didn't change much at all. All right, so let's rewind for a second. Who even was Jack the Ripper? So we are in London, 1888, the Whitechapel district. It's overcrowded, poor, and honestly kind of a rough place to live. And right in the middle of that, someone starts killing women in a brutal, disturbing ways, out on the street late at night. The media starts to call the killer Jack the Ripper after a letter is sent to the police signed with that name. Whether the letter was legit or just a hoax, no one really knows. I don't think we ever will. But the name stuck, and so did the fear. There were 5 main victims that are usually linked to the Ripper. They are often called the canonical 5. Their names were Mary Ann Nichols, Annie Chapman, Elizabeth Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Jane Kelly. All of them were women living in poverty, and most were involved in some type of sex work. Their murders weren't just random, they were most likely targeted, vicious, and escalated over time. Throats slashed, bodies mutilated. In some cases, organs were even removed. And here's the thing that actually still gets me in this case. All of this happened outside in public areas, and no one ever really saw him. He just vanished into the fog every time. And perhaps this is one of the reasons why he became such a legend. So yeah, Jack the Ripper was more than just a killer. He became a symbol of fear, mystery, and everything the justice system couldn't catch at the time. All right, so now let's talk about who people think he might have been. The suspect list is huge. Like, people have accused everyone from barbers to royals to random artists, but today we will just stick to the main ones, the names that come up again and again in books, documentaries, Reddit threads. First up is Aaron Kosminski. He's probably the most talked about suspects today. Kosminski was a Polish Jewish immigrant living in Whitechapel at the time. He had a history of mental illness and was eventually institutionalized a few years after the murders. A lot of people think he fits the profile: local, troubled, and kind of a loner. We'll come back to him later because that DNA stuff, yeah, it involves him, as you are probably aware. So next up is Montague John Druitt. He was a barrister and a teacher, and some people think he may have had a breakdown and died by suicide not long after the final Ripper murder. That timing did make investigators at the time go, but honestly, there's not much else linking him to the case, and mostly it's just circumstantial. Then we also have Prince Albert Victor, yes, as in Queen Victoria's grandson. This theory is a lot. It basically suggests a massive royal cover-up, not the first one in history anyway. Secret, illegitimate children and all kinds of Freemason drama. So honestly, it reads more like a movie plot than a real possibility. But it is one of those ideas that just won't die. And honestly, I'm not even surprised because I love reading theories like this. Another big one is Walter Sickert. He comes up a lot thanks to the author Patricia Cornwell, who even bought some of his paintings to test for DNA. She thinks he was obsessed with the murders and may have used them as inspiration in his art. It's an interesting theory, but again, a lot of historians completely disagree. And just for fun, there are other wild suspects too. There are time travelers or theories that Jack was actually a woman pretending to be a man. It's honestly endless. And if you were alive in London in 1888 and a little bit weird, someone probably thought you were the Ripper. But here's the thing. Despite all these names, no one was even charged. No one even got close. And I think part of why this mystery still hooks people is because the truth feels just so out of reach. Like we are kind of close, yet still totally in the dark. And any wild theory seems like it could be the possibility. All right, so now let's talk about that big moment that first happened in 2014 when the headlines were screaming, Jack the Ripper identified. A businessman named Russell Edwards claimed he had finally cracked the case, and the internet went wild. The theory was that Aaron Kosminski was 100% for sure the killer. And the proof was this old Victorian shawl. Yes, the shawl. So here's how it all went down. Edwards said that he bought a shawl at an auction. Apparently, it's the same shawl that was found next to the body of Catherine Eddowes. She was one of the Ripper's canonical victims. So Edwards got the shawl tested for DNA. It was done by a molecular biologist, and the results showed a mitochondrial DNA match to Eddowes' living relatives and to Kosminski. That sounds huge, right? The DNA doesn't lie. Except in this case, it kind of does. I mean, it could. Here's what it actually meant. First of all, there's no official records that this shawl was ever even at the crime scene. No police log, no photo, nothing. It was allegedly taken home by a police officer that wasn't even on duty. He was randomly there. It was taken as a souvenir or a gift to his wife. And apparently she was so shocked, horrified, I guess, that she just put the shawl away, never washed it. And for some reason, they kept it for generations and never washed it or anything. So yeah, this sounds already quite unbelievable. And I mean, even if the shawl was kept safe for years, it was still never sealed, never properly preserved for like over 100 years. How many people must have touched it? I mean, it was displayed. At some point, it did belong to a museum. It was never displayed because the museum actually couldn't prove that it was authentic shawl that belonged to Eddowes, but they did have it in storage. A lot of people handle it, touched. There are even photos of Edwards himself holding it like this, no gloves, nothing like this. So obviously, whatever is found on that kind of has no meaning. If that was the current case, they would laugh at it in court. Oh, and I forgot to add, when Edwards actually had the shawl in his possession, it was presented to Kosminski's relatives. So they handled it as well. So it could have been contaminated by his descendants. Let's talk about the DNA. The mitochondrial DNA is not like a fingerprint. It's passed down from a mother to a child and shared with tons of people. So just because the DNA could match someone from Kosminski's maternal line doesn't mean it was him. It could also match thousands at this point of other people. As you can imagine, experts pushed back on this. One of them was Dr. Turiking, and if her name sounds familiar, it's because she's the genetist who helped identify Richard's third bones. She said this kind of DNA evidence just isn't strong enough to name a killer. Not even close. And she's not alone. Another voice in the mix is Dr. Wayne Weston Davies. He put forward a completely different theory that the Ripper was actually his own ancestor. He even tried to get permission to exhume a body to test his idea. That got some headlines too, although it hasn't gone anywhere big. So yeah, the media called it a breakthrough. Edwards wrote a whole book about it, but the science behind it, it's shaky. The DNA doesn't prove Kosminski did it. At best, it's just one more piece in a giant, very messy puzzle. And I gotta say, it's wild how fast this blew up online. People were ready to believe this was the final answer, like the case was solved in a lab over 100 years later. But when you look a little closer, it's just not that simple. And now in January 2025, more than 10 years after the original testing, Russell Edwards came back into the headlines again. This time, he was calling for an official inquest to declare Aaron Kosminski the Ripper once and for all. Talking about milking it. But here's the thing. He didn't have any new evidence. I admit, when I first seen the headlines, I was also like, oh my God, okay, they found something else. It's confirmed. It's true after all this time. But no, there's no updated DNA analysis, no fresh forensic breakthroughs, just the same results from 2014, the same shawl, and the same theory that had already been picked apart by experts a decade earlier. And that's what I find kind of wild. Like, imagine sitting on this one DNA result for 10 years, watching it get criticized from every angle, and then just popping back up like, hey, by the way, I think it's time we officially close the case. I don't know. To me, that feels more like a publicity push than a scientific update. But I do admire his persistence for sure. So I don't really understand how it caught fire online again. I guess Jack the Ripper is one of those stories that never really dies, and people love the idea of a final answer, even if that answer isn't all that new. And I guess maybe because even within the world of serious ripperologists, yep, that's a real term I just learned, there's still a ton of disagreement. And that always keeps that fire going. And almost all of them seem to agree that Edwards' DNA angle just doesn't hold up to scrutiny, which doesn't change the fact that there's even more crazy theories about it out there. It's kind of like when mystery's been unsolved for this long, people really want to be the one who cracks it. That means that very often the conversation gets louder than the actual evidence. Okay, so after all the hype and the headlines and even the second round of publicity this year, here's the thing. Nothing actually changed. There were no new suspects, no new evidence, not even new DNA testing. What Edwards did was basically repackage the same 2014 results and try to make them go viral again. And it worked. Good job. I get it. Jack the Ripper is one of those cases that just grabs people. I completely got sucked into it as well. So even the idea of new evidence feels exciting. But once you dig into it, it's pretty clear that it wasn't a breakthrough. It was more like a PR move. And here's what I think. It's kind of frustrating because on the surface, it looks like progress. Like finally, after more than 100 years, we've got an answer. But when the foundation of the claim is something as shaky as possibly contaminated shawl with non-specific DNA, we are just back where we started. So does the DNA tell us something interesting? Yes. Could it suggest Kosminski might be worth looking at again? Sure. But does it solve the case? No, not even a little. So after all that, we are kind of right back where we've always been with Jack the Ripper. It is still one of the biggest unsolved mysteries in true crime. We've got the victims, we've got the timeline, we've got a lot of theories, and now we've got this DNA claim that made a splash multiple times, but it didn't really give us anything solid to hold on to. To me, this is a good reminder of how powerful a story can be, especially when it's wrapped in a mystery, history, and the one big question of who did it. And honestly, maybe that's why this case never fully goes away. Even when someone says, I've solved it, we are still left wondering. So, what do you think? Do you buy the DNA story, or are you more convinced by one of the other suspects? Let me know in the comments. I would love to hear your thoughts on this one. I love talking about crazy theories like this. And if you like this video, feel free to give it a like, subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next week with another case that crosses borders and keeps us thinking. Take care.